As high winds began to blow and midnight approached, Wayne at last told his men that they were not to retreat an inch or load their weapons without orders, under penalty of instant death by the nearest officer. But he was determined to provide an example to his men, and Wayne led from the front of the attack, and this battle was going to be quick and fierce. The entire battle took approximately 30 minutes to conclude in actual time, and we'll see when the reenactors kick this off in about 5 minutes how long our reenactment will take under daylight conditions and dealing with 21st century safety concerns. One of the things you've got to remember about the 18th century is the weapon system and the weapons of the day. They're firing flintlock muskets. Flintlock muskets are smoothbore weapons. There's no rifling in the barrel. They're very short range. They're very inaccurate. Killing range on a musket is approximately 100 yards. So if you're firing a weapon, you could probably kill someone at 100 yards. We play football and soccer at 100 yards. They're fighting wars at that distance. Artillery, of course, can go 300 to 500 yards. So having a fortified position with artillery made something almost impregnable, and artillery was very, very important. So the flintlock musket, you have to tear off a cartridge, load the paper, load the priming pan at the back, put the rest of the charge down the barrel, put the lead ball down the barrel, ram that home to the bottom of the barrel with a ramrod, put the ramrod back, cock the musket, and when you pull the trigger, you hope that the flint hits a piece of hardened steel, makes a spark, sets off the pan, and that the flash in the pan goes through the tiny touch hole and sets off the main charge. So what I just described is a 13-step loading process and a Rube Goldberg firing system, which is unreliable. And when you hear the term flash in a pan, that's an 18th century military term when you pull the trigger and the pan goes off, but the gun doesn't go off. So it's not a cooking accident. A flash in the pan is a mishap with a flintlock weapon. So I'm giving you this background on the technology to get a feel of the fact that in the 18th century, during the American Revolution, you were fighting at incredibly close distances, and you concluded a firefight with a bayonet charge. The men carry 17-inch long triangular bayonets, which they would fix to the muzzle of their weapons, and then go in and finish the firefight with cold steel, hand-to-hand combat. And that's just what regular infantry did during the American Revolution. In 1778, having been trained by General von Steuben at Valley Forge, Washington's army now was a professional force. They marched out to the Battle of Monmouth in 1778 and fought the British to a standstill in an open field using the same types of tactics, the same kind of weapons as the British Army. Remember, we had, as Americans, were fighting for our independence against the British Empire, the greatest army and the greatest navy in the world that had just won the 7 Years' War 20 years earlier, the French and Indian War here in North America. We took on the greatest empire in the world to gain our own independence. So it's amazing to think that in 1775, when the war starts, we literally have no army, we have no training, we have a militia, citizen soldiers, and in just 3 short years, under brutal conditions, losing almost every battle, except the important ones like Princeton and Trenton, we've come out with a professional force that then can take their elite light infantry companies and in 1779 send them on a special mission here at Stony Point to retake this promontory, this key passage because King's Ferry, right behind here, was the main artery this far south on the Hudson between New England and the Middle Colonies. And the Hudson controlled most of the American Revolution. It's critical to remember that, especially all of you who are local, that this whole area was the highway that kept the country together, and that for almost the entire war, from 1776 to 1783, the British occupied New York City, and anyone living on the Hudson River, as far as Kingston and further, were on the front lines because the British Navy controlled the water. Column under Major Hardy Murphy, who's annoying the British sentries at the front, and the British that are posted at the front gate area are returning the fire. And with the firing, the British commander is going to be bringing the entire garrison to their alarm posts. And once the 12-pound cannon in Fletch #1, there it goes, you hear the cannon? Once that began to fire, the entire garrison knew something serious was afoot. Otherwise, the artillery wouldn't be going off. The men will be being roused by their officers to wake and arm themselves. Overall British Commander Lieutenant Colonel Henry Johnson can be seen out there trying to organize his men and prepare a detachment to support the lower works. Now we're up here sitting in the upper works. We're going to have the action be rolling in. Keep your eyes towards the left. General Wayne's column will be storming up the cliffside to your left. Meanwhile, Colonel Johnson is organizing his counter attack to go down and defend the lower works. He's taking almost all the garrison down the hill. Meanwhile, there are two columns, one coming up on your right, which is the left column, and one coming up on your left, which is the right-hand column under General Wayne, attacking a veteran, hardened British regiment, the 17th, one who has already fought to the death once before when attacked at Princeton in the winter of 1777. So this is an interesting, almost ironic situation, but you've got the best of the Continental Army attacking some of the most veteran British troops, British regulars. And you can hear the engagement down the hill. Colonel Johnson, commanding the 17th, had just spent a stint in the light infantry for the British Army and was a capable 31-year-old officer from an Anglo-Irish family in Dublin. They were used to hard campaigning, but there are, because of all the casualties the 17th Regiment took, there are many newer recruits that are from Britain and even some from Germany in the ranks. But these men are determined to defend what they call the Table of the Hill, which is where we're standing today. So they're determined to defend this highest point of Stony Point. And the battle is rolling up the hill. You're only hearing firing from the diversionary attack and the British troops. All of the flanking columns climbing the cliffs are coming up armed with the bayonet alone. Very early stages of Wayne's attack, that his second in command, Colonel Christian Thieberger, a Virginian born in Denmark, Thieberger's men coming up on the left flank and in turn were led by Lieutenant Colonel Francis de Fleury, an engineer from France, and before his columns, Forlorn Hope, who were below the works opening a path to enter the fort. So both of the flanking columns had what they called in those days a forlorn hope of 20 or so men armed only with axes to cut their way through a wooden abattis, which are felled trees. You cut trees down in the direction the enemy would come. You would trim all the branches and limbs to sharp points, and you had what in the 18th century would be the equivalent of barbed wire. So the abattis had to be cut through to allow the troops to come through. The Forlorn Hope is called that because they're literally a suicide squad that has to go in front armed only with axes and stand in front of the attacking column and cut its way through the abattis to allow the men through while they're being fired at by artillery and musketry. It was a very honorable thing to command the Forlorn Hope and be assigned to it. Later in the war, Joseph Plum Martin, who wrote a wonderful diary of the American Revolution, you'll find it under the title Private Yankee Doodle. He was in the Forlorn Hope at the attack of Yorktown, and you can read a description of that for yourself, of what it would have been like. You can see that, again, the troops are firing at the approaching flanking columns. Historically, there were 15 pieces of artillery here at Stony Point, but none of the guns up here in the upper works ever fired. Lieutenant John Roberts of the Royal Artillery was arguing with Captain Clayton about Clayton saying to Roberts, for God's sake, why isn't the artillery here not being made use of? And Lieutenant Roberts went off to find out what was going on with his guns, only to go right into the path of the onrushing Americans. And Roberts himself narrowly avoided capture by swimming out to one of the British ships out in the Hudson. And his artillery up here at the top of Stony Point never did go into action. With the British firing now, it must be Colonel Thieberger's column making it up to the top of the hill. Down at the flag bastion, Lieutenant Colonel de Fleury has knocked down the British flag, and the British are completely surrounded. General Wayne's column should be cresting the slope to your left at any moment.